thanks for coming along today. We've got a lot to talk about, and we want to make sure we've got some time at the end for questions. So we might start off. I'm Bindi Green. I work at RAV as the manager of the touring department, and we've got a few of our representatives here today. We've got Nikki Ralston, who's our Connecting Places coordinator, who's headlining today in delivering the program, the Connecting Places program. She'll give you a bit more of an update about that. We've also got Adam Fawcett here, who's our marketing and communications coordinator from RAV as well. And he'll be there monitoring the chat line. And so feel free to post questions in the chat as we go through today. We've also got a couple of our tour coordinators here, Annie Stevens and Luke Wolf. And we've got Nell, who's just recently joined us, Nell Ustendag, who's our administrator. So we are pretty much the touring team at Regional Arts Victoria. And we're really stoked to be here to chat to you about our beloved Connecting Places horse touring program. Just a little acknowledgement of country. I'm hosting today from the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people in West Footscray. So we're traditional meeting grounds of where we are in the city of Maribyrnong, of those two different groups. So feel free, if you'd like to put your notes in the chat as to where you're joining from, you're very welcome to. We're going to go through and talk you through the application process today, a bit of housekeeping, and we will guide you through the application form. And we're keen to sort of take questions as we go at the end of each section. So we're happy to kind of stop and start a little bit, but we do want to make sure we've got some time for questions at the end as well. So can I just ask, everyone's pretty all on board, everyone's on mute, which is great. We're all very on board with how these things work these days, which is great. Feel free to turn your videos off. You're very well. We love seeing your faces, but also aware that you might be doing other things at the same time, or if you're not completely comfortable having videos on, that's completely fine as well, because we are going to be recording this session and we'll be hosting it up on our website for other people to access as well, who couldn't be here for the moment today. So I might hand over to Nikki to give you a bit of a brief overview of the touring team and a bit of the Connecting Places program, and then we'll get stuck into talking through the expression of interest application process after that.
Thank you, Bindi. Lovely to see everyone. I am very passionate about this Connecting Places program. It's a lovely program, so it's lovely to see the level of interest, and thank you for coming. So for those of you who don't, I should say too that I'm joining from Yarrawonga. So I'm up on the border of New South Wales on the lands of the Yorta Yorta and the Bangarang people. And I also just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this very beautiful land that I'm joining from. Connecting Places, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is Regional Arts Victoria's performing arts touring program, which is tailored to small halls and community-run venues. And we talk about community presenters, and they are the mostly volunteer groups who actually present the live performance in their communities. Who are they? So they're a huge range of people and a huge range of committees, tend to be not-for-profits, and they tend to be all volunteer-led. But they could include neighbourhood houses, hall committees, local arts councils, a real range of presenters. And I think that goes to the heart of this program as well. And that's also applies to the audiences. So we have a range of audiences that come and see shows on our tours. They're all different, all the towns are different, but I think the kind of key factor is that every show will have a diverse audience there, because often it's the whole town, if we're talking about these tiny little towns, tiny little halls, that will actually turn up to see a show. Some presenters have a long history of working in the performing arts. There are others who might be farmers or mechanics or engineers, anyone that just really wants to do something for their community. And so when we're thinking about Connecting Places and touring artists, I think it's good to think about the fact that often It's the artists that are the professionals in the room in terms of kind of getting the show on, presenting the show, doing that live performance. And the presenters are the experts in their community, and they know how to get the community to come along. They know how to get an audience there, and they know what the community wants as well. So what are we looking for when we look for Connecting Places shows? We want a mix, you know, we want things that are exciting. There's no homogenous regional community audience. I'm a regional community audience member. So we're definitely not stereotyping regional audiences, but there is an element that there has to be a broad appeal, because those audiences can be so diverse. You know, if you're touring metro areas, then audiences can self-select a little bit more, but here we really want the whole community to be able to come along and have a great time. So I might ask Bindi to share the guidelines, and we'll have a quick look through the selection criteria and how we're going to actually select the shows for the program. I think it's probably worth mentioning too that we are likely to take 2 or 3 shows through this process. So I'm aware there's a lot of interest, which is so wonderful, but I want to be realistic about expectations and about your time and energy in putting something into an application process as well. We have really tightened up our eligibility requirements this time, and that's because we really want to make sure that if you do put that energy and effort into applying, that you really are eligible, that your show's a good fit for this program. And unfortunately, we can't take all of them, and we know there'll be a lot of amazing shows that just won't work with what we need for this network at this time. So please do look at the eligibility criteria, and we can run through that quickly now. Sorry, now my screen's showing me something else. There it is. So I won't go through them all in detail because you can read them through, but they all have a kind of a reasoning behind why we've included them. And that's because our presenter network needs shows that are ready to go. You know, we're talking about volunteer-run not-for-profit committees, so they do need to be affordable. And to that end, obviously, we want everyone to be paid, and we want this to be viable and make sense to producers as well. So we do need to keep the touring party to a maximum of 3. You will need one of those people to be a technical operator as well. The technical requirements really need to be adaptable. So as we said, you could be touring into tiny halls, very different spaces. And to that end as well, and Bindi will talk about this a bit more later, but you need to be prepared to tour with, set up and operate all the technical equipment you need to present the show if required. So if we ask you to do that, there'll be additional funding provided, and we can talk to you more about that. But that's an option that we offer our presenters, and that really allows these shows to get out to some gorgeous, far-flung, welcoming spaces and places that they wouldn't otherwise be able to tour to. We also ask that your tour party is available for 2 to 4 weeks between April and November 2024. That doesn't have to be a consecutive block of time, and the project has to be able to bump in and perform on the same day. Having said all this, if there's a really, really good reason why you can't meet one of these, talk to us. But you will be asked to confirm all this right at the front of the application. So how do we actually assess these wonderful EOIs that come in? So we'll have a panel that will consist of Regional Arts Victoria staff with connection to this program. And then we'll also have a minimum of 3 community presenters on that panel as well, and they tend to be presenters that are part of our network. So what are we looking for? Well, we're going to ask our panel to score against the selection criteria that we've got very clearly in the guidelines. So just very briefly, I'll run through those. To what extent is the project likely to be entertaining and appeal to a broad cross-section of the community? As I mentioned before, we're not trying to stereotype regional audiences with this criteria at all, but it is that sense that there will be a real mix of people attending these shows across the tour. So the way we'll look at that is through the information you provide in the project description and the way you articulate that audience experience. As always, follow the prompts, get a friend who's not a performer or a producer to read it, see what they think, see if they'd be excited to go and see the show in the way it's described in that application. To what extent is the project likely to be high quality? No, that's a very tricky thing to talk about. Quality is, of course, subjective, and it's very hard to get across on paper. But it's really important that you give us the best sense as possible of what your performance, what your project is. So the marketing materials that you'll add in will really help here. Promo video, images, supporting material, as well as, of course, your description, your experience, and your history. So everything you can do to help us really understand what it's going to look like. Innovative and exciting. So I don't think it has to be innovative to be exciting. You don't have to be doing something crazy with form or content, but we want exciting ideas. We want to show that lights people up, something that makes it easy for the presenters to convince their communities to come along to that event. Relevant to regional communities and of interest to a range of Victorian community presenters. So again, it's about that diversity, that spread, that mix. And again, we'll look here at your project description, but also the marketing section and how you communicate your show and that appeal. Strong understanding of the context of working with volunteer community groups. So I think this is really important, that this is a very particular program, and it is about working with volunteers. They might, have full-time jobs and 5 other committee hats on. It's about being flexible, and it's about understanding that context. And as much as you can show that in your application through perhaps the company history or the bios of the people involved, the more confidence that's able to give the panel about knowing that, you'll be able to work really well in that context. Technical and staging requirements. So we'll really be looking at your tech specs for this section. And that's about, if you require any really specialty tech items, being prepared to tour with them. We're looking for light touch, flexible tech requirements where possible for this program. Opportunities for strong community involvement or engagement. This is a really interesting one. I think often people look at this and think, oh, I better add on a workshop or an activity, which is great. Like if you've got a workshop or activity that works with your show, that's fabulous. We want to hear about it. But that doesn't have to be it. I think community engagement can be broader than that. So, have a think about your show, whether, is it that you want to chat to the community beforehand and that it's naturally integrate that into the way you present your show? Is it about, what you do after the show in terms of interacting with the community? Think holistically about your show and that kind of integration and bringing the community along. That section's optional, but I would really encourage you to fill it out in the application form, because it does then help us to kind of assess that criteria in the assessment panel. So that's they're the key assessment criteria. And then once the panel has assessed and scored against all those assessment criteria, then there are some kind of balancing factors that we will look at. And you can see those, I won't have to go through them, but I think the key thing here is, it's highly likely we'll have quite a lot of really high scoring, amazing applications. And we need to also look at the spread of our program and what we've got across our whole program, what we're offering, and that we're meeting some of our values around diversity and equity as well. Hopefully that was helpful. Bindi and I have booking times, so anything that I haven't covered and you don't get in today, please book in a time one-on-one to chat and we can talk in more detail. But I will pass on to Bindi now to go to the website.
Bindi on mute still. Thank you. Classic mistake. So this is our Regional Arts Victoria homepage of the website. And just under here, we've got the halls touring, the link to the halls touring. Expressions of interest open now. So it's just a few little clicks through. And a lot of the information that we've just gone through in the guidelines will be here as well. Applications are open now. We'll be closing on Sunday, 28th of May. There's some good little links in here. You can connect through, have a look at what shows are touring this year to give you a bit of an idea of what we're doing. Here is also where we've got linked again the eligibility requirements that Nikki's just talked through, and the assessment criteria here again. One thing it's good to note, I think, is that we've reshaped this program a little bit this year. We've tightened up the eligibility requirements very much in response to the experience that the community presenters were having last year. A lot of them really struggled to get funding to present the program that we were offering this year, and a lot of them are facing they're just not facing capacity problems with being able to afford some of the bigger shows. And so that's kind of why you'll notice that the fees have dropped a little bit from the last year. We're looking at responding to requests from that network for shows that they can be less reliant on the funding rounds for, that they can manage to be able to pay the fees themselves a little bit more. So we've tightened up the requirements to really tailor the program to reflect what the presenters are able to book and to present, which means essentially it's going to be much more successful touring opportunities. There'll be hopefully more presenters will be able to get on board and book the shows that we're offering. In here, we've also got the guidelines that we just had a look through. As highly recommend you have a read through of those. We've also got a drafting document, which pretty much has the entire, which will show you all the questions that are asked in the application. But in a Word document, I have quite a slow computer, and so you can download this one and fill out the questions as you go, so that you can, so when you actually go into your application, you can wait for that to open up. You can be all ready to go. There we go. So in here, a list of things that you're going to need, a reminder of the dates, links through to various resources, and then here are all the sections here in a Word document. So you can have a go at this, prep your submission before you actually populate the application. Attend our info session. You've done that one. Well done. You're already halfway there. Here's also where you can book a time with either Nikki or myself. That will take you through to a phone booking page where you can have a look and see what dates we have available. So there's Nikki and myself. It's a bit hard to see, but essentially one of these, where are we? There are some dates on here. So if I tick Nikki, some of these dates go a bit dark black. If I tick myself, there's some dates here. So you just kind of have to use your have a good close look, and then you can click on a date and the times will appear. As those sessions get booked up, those times will disappear. We can see 10 a.m. has already disappeared out of that. They're 15-minute appointments. We'll see how we go. Nikki and I both have like a 2-hour block carved out in our calendars for these each week. And we've tried to offer up some alternate times, some early morning, some early, end of the day kind of times to make it, to make us more accessible for you. If you can't find a time in this, then please get in touch with us, because we don't want you to miss out. Submit your expression of interest. So here's where we go to actually get to the application. There's an option here to save your progress. You can register an email and a password, and then you can fill out some of the form, save it, and come back and click back in and do it again. Here's a little countdown to show you kind of how far through you are. 12 pages. It does feel like a lot, but hopefully it's all information that is kind of a lot of information that we would need if you're successful. Once we move pretty quickly once we move from successful application to starting to work with you on building the tours. So what we're doing in this process is gathering all the information we'll need to create the contracts to start working on building tours and talking to presenters. So that's why it's quite big. The first question we ask, preliminary question. So this is a bit of a filtering device that we use. Is your work intended for primary or secondary age children? If you say yes, then you'll get a close this form, submit your application to the Arts and Ed. The Arts and Education program caters specifically for school-aged audiences. And for Connecting Places program, we select one of their shows that's being offered in that program to offer to our network of community presenters. So rather than doubling up and applying for through the two different streams, we direct all works that are for that age group to the Arts and Ed program, to the Arts and Ed application process, which is running at the same time as this one. So that one is also open now and accessible through our website. And so you can talk to Pippin, who runs that program, if you've got any questions. And there's an option in that application form to indicate that you're also interested in Connecting Places. So if you won't be able to continue if you tick yes for that one. If you tick unsure, that'll just direct you to book in a phone appointment so we can actually discuss whether it's worth you applying through this one or the other one. If you say no, boom, we're in business. Here's all our eligibility requirements. We've got these as a yes or no. Yes or no. If you fill out, ideally you're ticking yes to all of these. And then the last question is, I confirm I've answered yes to everything, and so I'm therefore met all the eligibility requirements. We did consider that there might be one or two of these questions which you want to answer no, but you might still be eligible for the program, in which case we'd say get in touch and have a chat to us. And one example would be, actually we do need to have a remount, but we've built that into our show fee, because essentially we're asking about remount because we can't afford to gather any additional presenter seller fees to cover the cost of a remount. But if you have additional funding that can cover that, then you'll still be eligible for the tour. Similarly, we've had companies that we've worked with in the past where they might have their own funding that covers some of the costs of the show, so that they can afford to subsidise a tour with us. They might have 5 people in a touring party, which starts to push costs up for travel costs, for an additional vehicle on the road. All that starts to increase the fees, but they can still meet the show fee that we need to be able to make their show affordable to our network. So if you're finding that you're coming up against a bit of discrepancy in this section, then please get in touch with us, because while this is our eligibility criteria, there might be a little bit of flexibility around a couple of them if you have additional resources available to you. So by the end of this one, we're saying yes to all of those to be able to continue. Just want to check in if we've got any questions on anything we've talked about so far before we keep going. Nope, all good. Amazing. Company information. So this is all info that we're gathering, which will go directly into our contracts. So who's your company, a link to your website if you have one, or a Facebook page, or somewhere where we can actually go and find out a little bit more about who you are and what you do. Primary contact name is who is the designated producer for the show. We talk about those terms producer and presenter quite a lot. Presenter is referring to the venues, whoever books to present the show. producer is referring to the person representing the show, who's the one that we're going to be talking to the most. Preferred pronouns, role, email, contact details, all that's pretty clear. When we do contracting, some companies like to work with they have an agent or a manager, or they work auspicious arts projects. It's a very popular third-party producer or auspicing body. So just for us to know, so that won't affect your application either way. It's just so that we know when we're going to set up our contracts of who we're dealing with and who we're contracting with and what's going to be the nature of that arrangement. You will be, as a producer, you will be you're responsible for your touring party, for employing your people who are in the company going on the road. So you will be required to have your own public liability and workers' comp insurance. So that's just ticking the box to say that, yes, I understand and I will. Even if you don't have it right now, it's something that we can talk to you about and you can access at a later date. So here we're getting in project information, we're getting into the show. So what's the name of the show or the project? Brief description, what's a little, one-liner that just tells us about basically what it is. There's a little bit more opportunity to go into detail in the marketing section later on. So really this is just a quick catcher to let us know, is it a comedy, is it a drama, is it a show, is it an installation, what's going on here. Project type, performance, workshop, residency. Anytime you get another one, a little box will open up. Just give us a bit of an idea of what it is if we haven't provided the right descriptor. Art form, select as many as apply. That can be, because no show is ever only one thing. So feel free to fill out that and as much as applies. Project description. So this is where this is a description of what is the audience experience. So this is where you're telling the presenters what you're talking to them and saying, well, look, it's a theatre show, we perform it in the round, audiences come and have eat and drink. 6 people get brought up on stage to be celebrated as champions of their town. We finish up with a big band number, or whatever happens. What actually is going on in this event, in this show? Is it a sit and watch? Is it interactive? It just helps the presenters to understand what sort of a night does this offer for their audiences. This is not about marketing copy that is selling your show. This is about talking to the people who are wanting to book the show, who might book the show, about why they should book it and how amazing it is and why they should, what's going to help them understand what your show is so they can sell it to their audiences. Community engagement description. So this bit is optional. So what are the kind of extension? Are there any extension offers that can come with your show? Are there opportunities to run workshops? Often with communities are always looking to make the most of having artists come to their town. So if there are any workshops, if there are any residency opportunities, any interesting artist talks that might be posted alongside, any hair and makeup classes, tips and tricks sessions that you can run, anything that helps to make more connections between you and that community. You can either write it in here, or if you've got a flyer or a one-pager, you can attach it as a supporting document and just make a note in here that please see attached community engagement plan. It's often these things will be things like a Q&A after the show. Generally, there's no cost attached to that. Generally, that's kind of considered part of the night, especially if it's a topic of interest and concern within the show. that people might want to, that a Q&A is appropriate for. And they usually go for about 10-15 minutes, and then we sort of wind up. However, if it's running a circus or a performing arts workshop or something that kind of takes additional time and setup, then there's opportunity to charge an additional fee for that. And for presenters, that's something that can be really good to help them to sell tickets as well. So they can, if it's a family kind of show, and they can come and do a workshop the day before, or it can help them kind of generate a bit of word of mouth around the show and get a bit more interest. So use this to describe, or you can add an attachment at the end. Company description. So that's just a little bit more about who you are and what you do. What sort of things, just tell us a bit more about yourself and why Connecting Places resonates with you and your company. Cast and creatives, who are the key people in the team? There are some presenters who really like knowing who did the lighting design, who wrote the play, there are some savvy people out there who really kind of like making those connections. Also, we understand that you might not know who all your cast are going to be just yet, because we're talking about during in 2024. So that's totally fine, and it won't affect your submission if it's still to be advised. But even just listing maybe who's been in it before is really helpful. Equity and diversity. We're really committed to working with our presenters in regional areas to start to tour works that represent the actual diversity of their populations and their communities. So telling different stories, seeing different faces on stage, sharing the breadth of experience that we all experience as humans, and being able to reach out to different communities in regional areas. It's something that we factor into a lot of our programming choices, and also in our reporting to our funding bodies as well. So this is optional, but it's really helpful for us to sort of know who's applying and who might be able, what different groups in regional areas we can start to represent and send more shows to represent. Project showing in Victoria in 2023. We asked that mainly because we're keen to come and see it if it is. If there's an opportunity, if you're successful as an applicant to the program and you've got a season in the Fringe Festival, or you're doing a show somewhere out in the regions, like it's a great opportunity to invite presenters to come and see it, especially if they've booked the show, and there's an opportunity where they can actually come and see it before they present it in their hometown. How fabulous. And it helps them enormously in knowing how to support you when you arrive, and how to market your show as well. So it's good to know if there are opportunities there. Presentation during history. You don't have to be too laborious about it. Just give us a bit of a rundown of some of your highlights of where it's been. It can be just June 2023. If you can't remember exactly what dates are not super important. Just gives us a bit of an idea of what the history is, how solid your show is, I can't think of the word, but that you've actually, it's a show with some legs in it. You've had it. It's had one or two runs. Tour party information. So here's where we're looking at who's on the road. So we've made a eligibility requirement to be 2 to 3 people. That's mainly around the idea of capacity of funding for the travel costs for the show. So we can fit 2 or 3 people in one vehicle usually. It means that there's more opportunity for more seasons, if the costs, like that's a kind of practical reason. But also we're very aware that we've kind of we've brought down the producer fee as well to between $2,000 and $2,500. And so that's once your company size gets over that, it starts to become not super affordable to be able to support more than that many people on the road and still be able to pay a proper award wages. Again, this is one of those areas where if you have some flexibility in your resourcing and you might have a bigger party that you can help to support, just let us know, be in touch with us. But yeah, ideally we're looking for kind of small companies to move who can be pretty light and agile out on the road. So who are those people in the tour party? So these are they two cast, and generally it's cast and a technical coordinator. Some for this kind of touring, and we'll get to it in the technical area, because of the expertise level of some of the venues and because a lot of the halls don't have a lot of gear, we work with our touring parties to be able to tour with a basic kit of equipment, of lighting and sound equipment. So it might be a couple of lighting trees with half a dozen park hands and a simple PA. So that becomes a requirement that you have the capacity to set that up and operate that when you're in the town. It's really, really helpful if the tour party has a tech person as part of the tour party. Some of the venues, they might have some tech gear, but they might not have. The committee who's hosting the show is sharing that hall with a number of other groups, and they might not have anyone who's really has any great understanding of how that gear works. So we've just found it's from experience that you kind of need someone who while the show's happening can be looking after the lighting and sound requirements of the show within that tour party and making sure that what the hall has and what you're touring with match up and everything is covered. Availability. When are you available in 2024? When are you not available? Like that might be something like school holidays. I've got kids. I don't want to be on the road while the school holidays are on, but during term time, no problem. It might be I'm going to Edinburgh in August, but outside of that, I'm available from April to November. We tend not to tour during November to November. Sometimes we do a little bit in March, but generally not. We tend to look at November to March as there's a lot of reasons why it's not a good time for touring. November, December is kind of end of year. People are really busy. Community groups are quite busy with their end of year focus on all the community activities, so they don't always have availability or capacity to be putting on entertainment nights, putting on events. We're also getting into bushfire season in that time, and so there's a lot of the community groups are focused on that, and they're as with all volunteer groups, if you're volunteering on the Arts Council, you're also volunteering for the CFA, and that becomes their focus at that time of year. It's also harvest time in early autumn, that sort of coming out of summer into autumn. So it's a really busy time agriculturally around the state. So again, another reason why it's not a great time to be touring shows. So we talk about the April to November time as when our shows go out on the road. Transport notes, what vehicles do you need? How much stuff do you have? What are you taking on the road with you? That's just helpful for us to start budgeting for what sort of a vehicle we might need to provide you with. Getting close to the end, fees and royalties. So we tend to work in what's called the seller fee model with this program. So you set a show fee, and that fee goes to you. and the box office and all the ticket sales go to the presenting organisation. So they use that income from box office to cover their costs of hiring the hall, of paying for the artist fees, of covering their advertising. So all their so they take the box office. They're generally, these are not-for-profit organisations most of the time. Predominantly, they are, all their money they make goes back into their organisation and goes into, you know, getting the roof fixed in the hall and getting the, you know, new cupboards in the kitchen. And so they're often looking at these events as an opportunity to make a bit of money to do some upgrades in the hall, or to keep their community activities going. Per performance or weekly, or you can put something in for both. In this program, we generally are working in a per show fee model, because it is predominantly community events. It's usually weekends where they're booking shows. It's mostly Friday nights and Saturday nights, because that's when the community is available to host a show and all be in the same room together. We do add the weekly fee in there because sometimes that's if you don't absolutely need to put that one in, but if you do know what your weekly fee is, then that can be useful as well, especially if we can start filling out, maybe we could start looking at meeting a weekly fee by booking some shows in with some performing arts centres as well, and offering it to that network of presenters as well. Royalties, if you have a royalties commitment to your creative team, pop that in there, whether it's 5%, 10%, whatever it is, and we just need you to give us a breakdown of what that royalty breakdown is. We find this is a tricky one for our community presenters to kind of understand. So it helps if you are charging royalties on top of your show fee, then we just need a bit of help from you to explain, to convey that to the presenter networks. We've kind of done a few different things with this. We've had a couple of artists that we've worked with who've kind of, when we've talked to them about royalties, this network of presenters, they're usually keeping their show fees pretty low because they're trying to make it accessible for everyone in their community to come. So ticket sales are usually sort of, they can often be priced quite low. So the profit that comes off an event, a box office, after all the charges, is usually not super great. And so royalties can be sort of, you know, $50, $65. They can be quite low. So, and it's a lot of admin and a lot of work to recover. So we've worked with companies in the past who've just incorporated an extra $100 or a couple of $100 into their producer fee, and they have paid that, used that to pay back to their creative team in lieu of doing that work of tracking down royalties. But you know, royalties are absolutely an important part of how artists make income. So that, if totally pop that in there and let us know that won't be applicable for everyone. We understand. Describe your music licensing obligations. So that's just clocking what's in your show. What licensing requirements are there? What do you need to report to One Music? And we'll have further conversations with you about whether that becomes something that you take on managing, or whether it's the venues that do that work. But if the venues are paying those licensing fees, then you need to have that information available for them so they can make those arrangements. Marketing information. We're coming to the end now. So here is marketing. We've kind of got the last three sections of the form cover marketing, the tech requirements, and other supporting documentation. So what we've recommended is that if you can create a folder that you can share a lot of your material with us, and you can upload all of your information into like a shared Google Drive or a Dropbox document. But marketing, this goes, we work with you to create a toolkit and a strategy kit that we then share with the presenters. So a tagline, there's kind of pretty self-explanatory there. There's also a great video on our website in our tool school section about marketing with Adam, where he's kind of gives you a lot of great advice. But a tagline is the quick little one line, show synopsis, short and long, and then just a little bit more info around themes. So I think all of this is about helping the presenters to be able to sell tickets to their audience and convince their audience. Suggested age range, we recommend, if possible, competitive applications will be accessible to a wide range of people, because some towns will be looking, they might have, there might not be that many people in the town, and so they're wanting to make these events as accessible as possible. Warnings, again, the typical theatre warnings, anything that audience need to be advised at. Target audiences, who's likely to come. Is it a great show for a hens night? Is it a great show for theatre lovers? Who are good target? Who are good groups that the presenters can kind of think about while they're marketing? And any reviewer or audience quotes that you might have that would be helpful. Here we go. Here's the shared drive. So we put this recommendation under marketing, but it actually also, we've snuck a little bit of extra in here. So setting up a folder with your show title and your company or producer name, and then in there you can upload hero images, any extra images which are useful. Video, could be little marketing videos, it could be a link to a video of an archive version of the show. Any logos, also tech specs if you have them, like having a folder with your tech details, any other support materials, anything else that is useful for them to know. And then add a link in here to that folder with all of that information, so you don't have to attach all those documents here. If you book in a phone appointment, if you've got any questions about that, if you can't use Dropbox or Google Drive, or you'd like to make a different arrangement. Links, if you've got YouTube or Vimeo, if you've got links, any links you want to share with things that are hosted on other sites, pop them in there as well. So tech specs, you've got two options. You can either upload your own tech specs document about your show, or you can fill in all of these fields here with all the different requirements. So this is all the practical things that we need to know about the show. Bump in, how long does it take to bump in the show? How long does your show run for? Do you have an interval? Is it optional to have an interval? Can you put one into your show if presenters prefer it? Some presenters like to have a little break to make some more money at the bar. So if you're a music-based show is easily placed to be able to pop an interval in there usually, whereas a theatre show doesn't have that same capacity if it's like a 60-70 minute show. How long does bump out take? So that's about packing down, not necessarily packing down the venue, but just sort of getting the show packed up and back in the van. Do you need any help from the venue? Like, what sort of production support will you need? Someone to actually operate things and during the show is probably not preferred. I think this is where you're really looking to have your own tech person be the one who's operating as much as possible. But if you do need a little bit of help, maybe you need someone backstage just to throw something on stage, or maybe you need you might need someone just to do one or two things during the show. So it's so that the presenters kind of know what they need to provide. theatre formats, staging formats, what sort of style, any select all that apply. The more flexible and adaptable your show is, the more likely the more venues are going to be able to get on board. I think one of the key things about this network of presenters is everyone is so different. There are going to be compromises that you have to make because in terms of presenting the show, sometimes you might not have a black surround curtain behind you. Sometimes you might be on a really shallow stage. Sometimes you might be on a wide stage. Sometimes you might be sort of tucked up the end. You might be raised up and the audience is on a flat floor. Sometimes it's the reverse, where they've got tiered seating and you're down on the ground. The range of venues in regional Victoria is enormous, especially in this network. We've had shows in barns, we've had shows performed outdoors, in old milking sheds. It's so the more flexible and adaptable you can be, the better. Is there anything particular you need? A good instance of that was a shadow puppetry show that we've toured before. They needed to be able to have a blackout. Some shows that have quick changes, so they need a little bit of side stage area to be able to do quick costume changes. That'll just help to know which venues are suitable and which are not. Lighting and sound requirements. I'm just clocking the time. We're running out of time for questions. So I would say if you have any questions around that, maybe book in an appointment with me and have a bit more of a chat. But I think that it's what are the basic elements that you need to be able to put on your show? What do you think you need to kind of throw in the back of the van to be able to put the show on? And we've kind of put some examples in there. It just helps us to get a sense of which venues are going to be useful and which are going to be not. AV protection set items that you're touring with. What's useful here is kind of knowing, are there any big things? Sometimes you only have like a set of double doors or a single door to be able to access into the hall. So are there any odd bits and pieces that you think might pose a problem for getting in and out of spaces? Support materials. Here's where you can put your community engagement documents, any additional things. So that's the application form. It's not complete, but that's fine. So there we go. I might stop sharing and give back to Nikki. And I have talked quite a lot.
Thank you, Bindi. I was just going to really quickly zip through the timeline because I'd really like people to be able to ask questions. And just while Bindi's going to just open that up on their website, I just wanted to say too, I feel like we focus a lot on the challenges of touring to this network and that you need to be flexible and adaptable, and you need to not mind surprises. But it's an absolute joy as well. And we get a lot of artists saying it's the gig of their lives. You just get some really receptive audiences. You want to be up for eating scones and having chats and cups of tea and amazing suppers. But it's a really joyful program as well. And I just don't want to lose that while we're talking about all these kind of eligibility requirements. So the timeline's up on the website. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, most of that. Towards the end of June, before we launch the program, we'd be working with successful artists to really kind of finalise all the show information, put together packs that we can share with our presenters. We launch our program in July. So we at Regional Arts Victoria, we go around and talk to presenters, try and talk about what shows would be a great fit. We start the process of penciling in dates and things like that. During that time, we'd expect our successful artists to be in kind of producer mode, working on marketing materials, ready for conversations, ready to kind of confirm elements of the tech and things like that. So we'll be kind of keeping up that close conversation with our successful artists around that time. The really important thing to note is that we work to pencil in dates, and we try and put a viable tour together, something that works for presenters, something that is a great tour for our artists, something that's kind of cost effective and efficient. But a lot of our presenters are reliant on funding to be able to take these shows, and a lot of them apply for a grant fund called the Small Regional Presenters Fund. And results of that don't get announced until November. So what we do is we put together a tour with the dates penciled in, but we can't actually confirm that until those grants are announced. And in some cases, that means going back and looking at our dates and reworking things to make that work if some applicants weren't successful. So when you're thinking about your timelines, it's worth kind of factoring that in. But I think we've got 2 minutes for questions, maybe. So 4 minutes for questions. So please jump in or put anything in the chat if you'd like to ask anything.
There's just a question there from Steve and Nikki. Can you reconfirm how many shows you are looking to take from this round?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So what we do to make up our program is we take some shows from Showcase Victoria and some shows through this EOI process. So this year we had 5 shows touring on our program, and I think we had 3 from Showcase and 2 from the EOI process, and we'd expect it to be similar this time around.
Luth's just asked, there was a question earlier about interstate artists. I didn't see that one, sorry. If you could just touch on that, Bindi, about touring with interstate artists.
Yes, we are open to applications from interstate artists. We had 2 interstate artists in our program this year. Our program funding doesn't cover your costs to get here. Our program funding is based around is to support regional touring. So with our interstate artists, they have sourced other funding to be able to get to here, and also to cover the downtime between weekends. So if you've got one of them stayed with family, she had family in Melbourne, so it worked out really well that we would cover her travel costs, as we do with all of our touring artists, while they're touring regionally. For regional artists, that also included touring to metro halls as well, for Victorian artists. But for interstate, that's there's separate funding available too for some of those from Playing Australia. So we could talk to you about working with you to apply for travel costs to get from interstate to Victoria. But yes, we're looking for great shows to share with this network of presenters. So where those shows originate from is not it's not compulsory that they're based in Victoria.
Probably worth just mentioning too, and this came up in the chat as well, but it does tend to be weekend heavy dates. And so if you're an interstate artist and we're not covering your allowances, your accommodation when you're not kind of on the road, you have to kind of factor in that there will probably be gaps and weekdays where you're not actually touring and where we can't actually cover the accommodation and the allowances for that period. So again, yeah, staying with friendly family and, you know, being fed soup by a friend or something is a great option.
No more questions in the chat so far.
I think you're on mute, Bindi.
Me again. Please do book in and have a chat with Nikki or myself through the booking form. We're very open to talk. We're really keen to talk to you before you do the work of putting the application together, because it's a wonderful, but it's a very specific kind of touring program. So we don't want to waste your time, and we can kind of usually have a good sense of whether or not it would be a competitive application, and prevent you doing a lot of work if we think we'll have a really honest conversation with you about whether or not it's a good fit.
It could be an absolutely fabulous, brilliant show, but just not a fit for this particular program.
Great. Well, we might wrap up then, bang on 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for all coming. It's really great to see so many of you here. And hopefully we'll hear more from you soon.